Hi, this is Ruth Elizabeth Hancock, host of Work Your Energy podcast. I was recording an episode last night with Jeff Mara, and there are a couple of areas that I wanted to just add to the recording. So welcome to the subscribers of the Jeff Mara podcast. And here are a couple of areas that I didn't get to talk about last night. And this is the elongated skull people, who are just fascinating, and the inner earth people, which, we talk about this a lot. There's so many different stories out there, but there are actually people living under the earth. And I'll explain more about this and give some evidence behind it in a minute. So let's start with the elongated skull people. So the elongated skull people have actually been found all over the world on every single continent, can you believe? And although most of them are from the ancient tradition of head binding, which can be traced back at least 12,000 years, if not more. But some of them are very, very unusual with many anomalies. These are not from head binding. They're not normal human skulls. They're actually huge and 25% larger, 60% heavier. And they've also got the sagittal suture missing from the skull. They've also got two holes at the back of the skull, possibly to hold a larger brain. Certainly, if they have a very elongated head stretching up, then one would think that there is a larger brain in there. Also, they've got 50% larger eye sockets than us. And they also have more prominent cheekbones. And in some cases, the teeth are missing the canines, and in other cases, they've got very extended canines, and even found to have red hair. So these non-human, if you like, elongated skulls, although they have actually been found to be human, or at least the mother is human, the father has shown many anomalies. Their DNA either has been corrupted in some way, or it's worked its way out of the Earth DNA, or it comes from somewhere else because it hasn't been found here. These particular the very long elongated skulls have been found in Peru, Egypt, the UK, the Black Sea, Middle East area. And in particular, we have found some in Nazca, which are also in Peru, but there have been two different parts of Peru where we found these elongated skulls. And the ones in Nazca, they were found covered in this white algae, which allowed us to date them. And they don't even go back that far. One elongated skull female was found dating back to around 300 AD. And she was also with a small baby. The baby was dated to around 800 AD. And although they were not related, they did come from the same species. And again, the DNA tested at 25% human DNA, but the rest of it that they weren't aware, they didn't know what this was. And all of this seems to be indicating some sort of different species, maybe an ancient sister species, maybe a species from another planet, maybe species from inside the earth, whatever it may be, but it's not human. So this is something which I find fascinating. Also in Egypt, of course, we have Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti, and they both had elongated skulls, and so did their 6 children. And also Tutankhamun, who also had an elongated skull, and he was the son of Akhenaten. So again, this has come up in so many of our ancient texts, and it's so fascinating and incredible that we're now finding skulls and we can do DNA testing on them, and we can understand more about who these people are. I mean, maybe these people related to us from thousands and thousands, maybe millions of years ago, because as I talked about in Jeff's podcast, we have probably been on this planet for millions of years. The Indian Vedas talk about us having been here for 4 million years. The other texts talk about us being even here longer. The indigenous tribes, they seem to remember where they come from. They seem to remember their heritage. They talk about having come from the Pleiades. They came here, and then they either transformed human, became human, dropped into lower density to become human, whatever it may be. But we have signs of genetic altering in our DNA going back 250,000 years ago. So who did that, who was around that could do genetic alterations, which we can do today, but we think that we couldn't do it back then. So there are even signs of elongated people still being in our history. When you look at the amount of pointed hats, tall hats, the mitre hat from the Catholics, and the whistleblower, Karen Hoods, talks about how the elongated skull people are human, they're still around. So apparently they live in the Vatican, and the mitre hats, of course, could be covering that elongated skull. So this is fascinating. And the other area I wanted to go on to is the inner earth people. So are inner earth people even around? Well, I think they are. There have been thousands and thousands of documented cases around the inner earth people. And I find it pretty incredible that people would just make this up. There must be some sort of evidence or something to show that there are people living under the earth. And can people live under the earth? Well, yes. We will come to that in a bit, but first let's look at the Telosi and the Agathems. The Telosi, their main city is Telos under Mount Shasta in California. The Agathems, they are around the Himalayas, Gobi Desert, and they also have entrances in the South and North Pole. They are said to have pointed ears, long white hair, luminous, glistening skin, pale blue eyes. And this actually mirrors the people from Syria, Iran, the Iranians. They talk about their ancestors being glistening, luminous skin, pale blue eyes, white hair. And these particular people are said to have come from Alpha Centauri. Now, in my podcast with Jeff, I talked about how I think that we are related to many different off-planet species. I don't think that we are just one species. I think we are many, many different species. And this is something I talk about in my new book. And that's because we are so different, we are so varied. And the research that I've been doing shows that we contain up to 22 different off-planet species. So are these our ancestors? Well, I think they possibly were. But from my understanding and my research, the inner earth people are people in their own right. They're said to be able to live up to 1,000 years. The energy inside the earth is very different. It's filled with crystals. Crystals are very, very good for transducing energy, and they give us that sort of that life longevity that, our bodies, they can grow. You can grow plants and vegetables with crystal energy. So the main evidence that we have, because also our human ancestors have been going underground as well at many different points over the past few centuries, or even thousands of years, and that's because of the different wars and things we've had. So apparently after Atlantis, when it finally sank, people went from Atlantis and from Lemuria, and even going back Hyperborea, which is said to be 70,000 years ago, going all the way back there as well. So what evidence do we have of this? Well, interestingly, Austrian underground cave and tunnel explorers, Henrik and Ingrid Kusch, have put all their decades of experience into a book called The Secret Underground. And they filled it with information, and they show images of artifacts that go back as far as 60,000 years ago. And they also show very interesting letters and instruction from the church in 1590, who at that time, they decreed a law that people were no longer allowed to trade and do business with the subterranean cultures or the subterranean people. So who were these subterranean people? Well, obviously people who are living inside the earth. They were probably our ancestors related to us. But when the church passed this decree, they then set about telling all the landowners that they had to close up the tunnels, up the cave entrances, and all trading had to stop. Now, it's interesting to note that the word hell never appeared in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament it has. And we know that the New Testament, or at least the Bible, has been altered many, many times over the past few hundred years in order to, I think, add in new information, new guidance, whatever it may be, new laws. And maybe this is something which has been added in to stop people from going underground, maybe to scare them, to stop them going underground. So this doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but we have the evidence to show that we were trading and doing business with the inner earth people, the subterranean cultures, and then this stopped. So again, I find this also another fascinating area. And interestingly, there's also supposed to be peaceful reptilian species living underground as well. And of course, references to reptilians, dragons, serpents, it comes up in all of our different cultures, all of our myths, all of our legends. And again, this is something that, what are these people talking about? And, is something that we should explore more. Thank you for joining me with this extra bit of information. And if you haven't seen Jeff Mara's podcast, then flip over to his channel. And of course, before you go, don't forget to subscribe to my channel down below, and I'll be adding more information about this as the weeks go on. Okay, thanks very much. Take care. Bye.